first we have to welcome back our X, Y, and Zers.
Hey,
We go in the reverse order. So I'm the X, Miss Microwave Generation. I'm the Z. Oh my God, I did that at work too. You know, that's so crazy.
You just want to be an X.
I think I was meant to be an X. No, seriously. At work, I did that same thing. We were talking about like all the different generations because now we have Alpha. Your kids are Alpha. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, I can't believe I'm like the X generation. They were like, huh? Excuse me. No, I'm the Z. I'm the Z. And then we have our
Y.
And
millennial.
Yes, our millennials.
No, the resident millennial.
No, that does sound better. Yeah.
And I'm X.
Unfortunately,
nickname. Give me a nickname.
Yeah, guys, in the comments,
y'all
we need to know.
X-Men.
Oh,
X-Men.
I like
What
that.
about the women? X-people.
Okay.
My dad said that you use men for everything. That way, that includes everybody.
Because what men?
Yeah,
it's inclusive.
Okay, I'll be X-Men.
If any of the Xers are watching, we need you guys to give some really good suggestions. Seriously.
I'm about to just poll them in real life because they don't want to.
Yes, like come on.
You know what's going to happen?
What?
Because Gen X, we really just don't care. So you can't ask Gen X because we're going to be like, meh.
Right.
I might be the only one that's like, I don't have a nickname. Everybody else will be like, so.
Yeah. Well, back when they first started like putting a letter to you guys, they had to have something. We'll figure it out. Yeah, for sure. All right, so to open us up, I have questions. Uh-oh. Okay. So of course we're in chapter 41 of Genesis. And we're gonna be working through this, but first to start, I have three questions for you guys. First one. Have you ever been in a place where years felt like more than what it was? Days felt like years, or minutes felt like hours. You were in just such a precarious situation where it just felt excruciating. And if so, what was that situation?
I think anytime you're waiting for something that has an impact on what you do or how you live or what may be coming in the future, that time can seem to just drag on.
Yes.
Which usually means that you're in, I don't know about you all, but for me, it usually means that you're in some sort of distress, right? Or something's going on where you're just like, man, what's taking so long?
Yeah, I agree.
So that's one that jumps out to me.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like when I'm in the office, I'd be like, bro, it was 2:00 10 minutes ago. It's still 2:00.
Yes.
But I don't know. I feel like a lot of times for me, time goes fast more than slow. And maybe it's me looking back. Maybe in the moment it didn't feel like that. But like you think about COVID and how we are still like, oh, last year. And it's like, no, it was like 3 years ago.
Yes.
So a lot of times it's going fast and we're not realizing how fast time is moving.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's because we harp on the things that are distressing us in that moment. They feel like they're taking forever, and then you're missing stuff. Because really time is flying by. Like, and it's kind of crazy to think about. I feel like in my anxious moments, I feel like the day will never end. Like, can we get on with it? Yeah. Like, I'm stressed out. Like, with school, for example, I'm like, okay, is this semester ever gonna end? We're in week 4 and it feels like it's dragging its feet. I feel like I've been in school for 5 years, but it's only been 2 semesters.
So you got another 5 years to go, 10 years.
Oh my gosh, that's what it feels like. Okay, my second question, I'm really excited for this one. Can you think about things in the past that God has used to prepare and position you for where you are right now? Give me a moment.
I feel like the person who asked the question, this is a deep one.
No, I need to think.
You had time to think about it. Things in the past that prepare me for this moment.
I'm going to relate it to this podcast because I think it's interesting, right? Because what we don't realize is that this is Chris's opinion, right? What I think we don't realize is that we're constantly building on things. So if you had asked me, all right, I'm gonna go back to, I went to church, not the church I'm at now, but my previous church. I would always look at like the ministers and be like, man, how they know so much?
Yeah.
And so, but then you start to get into areas where you are um, taking on responsibility and doing the reading and things on your own, and you wind up having the information that you need to carry you into something else. So like I would not be comfortable doing this if I had not spent that time with those folks, and those folks encouraging me to get into the word and asking me questions about the word and saying, hey, you need to be teaching. And I think all of that just builds on itself. So I think I think it's almost always a case, particularly in God's economy, where he's like, I'm putting you here, and if you're listening to folks and wanting to be discipled and wanting to grow, then you're going to naturally, because of your inclinations, gravitate to something, and that's going to prepare you to set you up for a different place.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case. And I think that's not just the case with biblically or in church areas, but I also think it's the case in, just your natural, normal proclivities.
I like
It's
it.
good. It's good. You don't have one?
I have one. Okay, I'll go. And I tell people this all the time. I feel like my entire life is the moment that is setting me up for something else, because I sit back and I think, and it's like, it kind of, depending on how you take it, it comes off different ways. But my life has not been hard. I feel like I've had a pretty, like, my mom set us up for greatness. She prepared us for the things coming in the world. Like, I had a very easy time in school. I got accepted to my schools. I was able to get in, get out. I was the valedictorian. I made it in college. I had a full scholarship. Like, I had very positive things happen in my life back to back to back to back. I never really had to, like, struggle for it. I worked hard for it, but it wasn't like I can't get accepted anywhere. I got to figure out what my next step is. Like, that wasn't my journey. And it got to the point where I was like, okay, this is so easy. I'm not tempting you, God, okay? But this is pretty simple for me, and I don't know why. Like, okay, when I would apply for jobs, I'm not worried. I know I'm gonna get it. Like, that's kind of how the attitude I started to adapt. And more lately, now that I'm getting more into, like, my faith walk, I started sitting back and I'm like, this is not happenstance. There's a reason why God is doing this the way he's doing this. And I think it's because he's preparing me to be able to speak about him and glorify his name with all the things that are happening in my life. And I know that's true because that has been happening back to back to back for the past, like, 3 weeks.
Wow.
Where I've been like, for example, yesterday I talked to my friend, and we were talking about, like, adulting and, like, moving and all the different things that come with being a young adult. And I was like, well, did you pray about it? Like, are you praying to God about it? Because you have to know what he wants for your life. And I'm like, who am I? Who am I? Like, because, like, I feel like I finally got to a point where I'm understanding this is not me doing these things. Yeah. It's God just working through me to be of, like, service and help to other people. So I'm like, okay, yep, God, I got it. I got what the mission is. I'm on it. I'm going to keep going for as long as I can, doing what you want me to do, unless you take me in another direction. But I think, like, that's just why I say, like, my whole life is setting me up for the next thing.
Yeah. And I think that's good, too, because when something does happen, you have so much to be like, God has got me to this point, and he's not going to forget about me.
Right.
So I like that, yeah.
Yeah. Y'all about to
have you
But it makes me remember, to your point, Moyo, I think when Israel crossed the Jordan into the promised land and the Lord told them to put the stones where they were carrying the ark across because the waters would separate, that was meant to be like a reminder to them that the Lord has been with you all of this time, even to the point of getting you to the Jordan, across the Jordan and into the promised land. So you have those things
absolutely
in your mind.
Absolutely.
And when you think about when God talks to Israel, even after they cross, God is saying, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Remember me. I am the God who brought you out of Egypt. Right? Remember. So it's like, God's like, I haven't changed.
I know.
I'm still the same guy.
I know.
I still expect the same things. I still behave the same way. I need you to know that so that you will behave and do and think the way that is ultimately going to be beneficial to you.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? But to go back to what you said, the realization, Jasmine, the realization that it's not about you all the time is huge. Because I think a lot of people get caught up, and I'm not going to call any names, and go into places where it really feels like a self-help thing. You have everything that you need to get to this point. And if you don't have it, then you need it. And it's really not about you. Right. It's not about when someone's in church, anybody in the pews. It's not even really about the pastor, beside the fact that they are to present the words of God that encourage and exhort and challenge the people who are in the church. It's really about God. And I think that we lose that a lot. And because we lose that a lot, I think that things like obedience fall by the wayside. Things like considering God holy fall by the wayside. Things like considering Jesus as more than just my homie fall by the wayside. Right. So I think that is huge once you come to that realization. So
thank you.
I am proud and happy.
Thank you. No, the last thing I'm gonna say on that, because we're gonna come back, because I want to know what your moment is. The last thing I'll say on that is, it might sound small, but this is what shocked me back into reality. I've been behind in school, and I have not been taking that seriously, and I had a very big conviction. Like I turned in an assignment half done, and just was like, well, and I've never done that. And I'm a straight A student. I've never like just thrown my work away, and just been like whatever, and waited to the last minute. And I was like, I know I'm not going to get a good grade. I told my professor, look, I waited to the last minute. It is what it is. I'll take the punishment, whatever. And I got 100% on that assignment. And I was like, I'm going to stop playing with you, God. I'm not going to, because you gave me this opportunity and I'm just throwing it away. I'm not appreciative for it. And I haven't been. And I'm like, you know what? I know that you want me to do this for a reason. I quite literally threw that assignment together in one day, and it's supposed to take you 7 days to complete it. It seems so little, but it was like, okay, I'm going to stop floundering this thing. I need to make sure that I'm doing what I have to do, because this is going to help somebody else. So if this is meant to help somebody else, and God, I'm supposed to be glorifying your name with everything I do, and I'm just willy-nilly throwing stuff together, that's not gonna work. So I need to get it together. Snap me back into place. Man, has it snapped me back into place. That's why I'm getting caught up. Like, we're not behind no more.
not behind anymore.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That's mine. All right.
I don't know. I think that I don't want to say I was raised to be a parent, but I feel like I was raised to be a parent. And so I was prepared. I basically raised my brothers, and I know how to run a house. I know how to manage finances. I know how to manage like just what it is to be, I don't know what the word is, because I don't want to say the leader, because my husband of course is the leader of the household, but he is the type of leader that delegates. So I am in charge of a lot of things in our house because that's just what I'm good at. And so our house runs smoothly because I was raised to do this. So I don't, like, sometimes I complain about it and I'm like, you need to do this, you need to do that. But at the same time, it's easy for me to just do it. So why stress myself and other people when I can just do it easily and we move on? So that is a lesson I'm learning. Trying to learn.
I would say that's a big one.
That's a really good one. Wow,
that's good.
Y'all are sharp.
that was.
It's a lesson I'm learning. So if you see me on We Grow saying something different, worry about yourself.
Mind your business, okay? Keep it to yourself.
See over here. When We Grown, it's a different story. But y'all know, I said I'm learning.
And that is okay.
That is fine.
Yeah. Well, I know I said I had 3 questions, but I think those pretty much cover the basis of what I was getting at, because the it's not about you part is one of the big things that is going to come out in the scriptures we're going to read. And I broke it out in 4 different categories. So it's waiting, working, dependence, and then consideration. But we'll get back to it in a little bit. I'm going to punt it back over to you, Chris, to start us off.
Nah, this was awesome. I got to sit back and watch. So next time it's you, Miss
Me? Oh, yeah. No. Jasmine got it. She's the scholar of the group.
Oh no.
Actually, both of you guys are the scholars. I'm just here. I'm a regular person.
No, whatever.
Episode 5.
Yes.
Genesis 41. And we titled this episode Joseph's Moving On Up.
The Jeffersons.
Yep.
Yeah.
So right, we were. I was toying with isn't that Drake?
Started from the bottom. Yeah.
Your original was "We're off to see the wizard."
Yeah, but that's when we were going to. That's when I thought
we would split it.
We would split it.
Okay.
Right, because if we split it, so. And I think to what you were saying with your breakup, when we split it, there's this whole sequence of events that happens that gets Joseph before Pharaoh. Mm-hmm. And that's when I'm like, we're off to see the wizard.
Yeah.
And then after that, then there's another progression of events that we'll talk about. But since we're going to do the entirety of Genesis 41, I think it's the entire growth or status change, might be better wording, that you see Joseph go through. Read verses 1 through 8 of Genesis 41.
I can read.
Okay.
All right. This is chapters 1 through 8. Okay. After 2 whole years, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile, and behold, there came up out of the Nile 7 cows, attractive and plump, and they fed in the reed grass. And behold, 7 other cows, ugly and thin, came out of the Nile after them, and stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. And the ugly, thin cows ate up the 7 attractive, plump cows, and Pharaoh awoke. And he fell asleep and dreamed a second time. And behold, 7 ears of grain, plump and good, were growing on one stalk. And behold, after them sprouted 7 ears, thin and blighted by the east wind. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 plump, full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. So in the morning his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all of the magicians of Egypt and all of the wise men. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was none who could interpret them to Pharaoh.
It's been a minute.
2 whole years.
2 whole years. Yep.
So I think that this gets back to what you were saying, Jasmine, about when does it feel like time isn't moving, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think, and let me know what you all think about this, that it also shows God's movement in time, if that makes sense.
Can you elaborate a little bit more?
So microwaver. Microwaver, and why are you considered the microwaver?
Because my generation wants everything like that.
So can you imagine your generation now and you wanting to get out, you knowing you shouldn't be in jail, you want it now?
Yeah. I'd be struggling.
2 whole years later.
Mm-mm.
That's not even including everything that got him up to the point where he met the baker and the cupbearer in jail. It's just been 2 years since the cupbearer got reappointed, reinstalled to his position. So I don't know. That's the first thing that jumped out to me. It's like 2 years since that happened. God, we want things to happen quickly, but God is like, nope, I'm working these things out in my time the way that I need to.
Yeah.
The way that I need to. What about the dreams? Is there anything startling in the dreams to y'all?
Yeah. First of all, the lucky number 7. 7. So and 7 is always my favorite number because I was born in July. So I was like, okay. And then I did some research about what 7 means in the Bible because I was like, 7. When I first saw there were 7 healthy, 7 unhealthy, or 7 full grain, 7 that were like not so great. I immediately was like, okay, God's saying something because 7, everything was created in 6 days. He rested on the 7th day. And I was like, okay. And then it's supposed to be the number of perfection and the number of completion. So I was like, okay, definitely something's about to happen. God is trying to send a message. Because I do know this story. And before I finished reading, I was like, oh, I know what's happening. This is we'll talk about it later, the famine and all. But that stuck out to me that there was a reiteration of 7 so many times to kind of make a point. Or at least that's how I saw it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Again, we have 2 dreams.
Yeah.
So we keep having these sets of dreams. The same Joseph had two, the cupbearer and the baker.
Yep.
And now we're here again at two dreams that mean something. So we've seen already that, well, actually, maybe we haven't seen yet, but with the cupbearer and the baker, we saw that these dreams are going to happen. Joseph's dream hasn't happened yet, but it's about to happen now. Yeah. So this chapter, we're kind of wrapping up all of these dreams.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because we haven't seen, like you said, the fruition of Joseph's dreams yet. Right? And he had two dreams, one with the straw, the bales of hay, and one with the sun, moon, stars. But we have seen the two dreams for the baker and the cupbearer to come true. So the makes me wonder if the intent of the author is to say there wasn't any real interpretation given of Joseph's dreams, but now that we're seeing these dreams, and we'll read through Pharaoh's dreams and see that those come true as well, it's like, okay, you really need to be paying attention to what Joseph dreams.
And I was going to say, I think even back then, his dad did say, like, so we gonna bow to you, like, you tripping. So that was kind of the interpretation, like they understood what it was about. It just wasn't plainly like, this is gonna happen on this day and this time, where these people are getting exact to the day. You get 3 days and this is gonna happen. You get 7, we haven't got there yet, but 7 years and this is going to happen. And Joseph is like, well, where my number at?
Right.
Because it's been a minute.
There's no timeline there. And then also, his dad did say, "Are me and your mom supposed to bow down to you as well?" But remember, in chapter 37, it also said something to the effect of, like, he stored and remembered,
kept it in his mind.
Kept these things in his mind. So it's interesting. One thing that stood out to me about the dream, a couple of things that stood out to me in the dreams, is one, the Nile. For the cows, the Nile is mentioned, I think, like 4 times, 3 or 4 times. And that's important for Egypt, because Egypt is the Nile. The Nile is the source of life for Egypt, basically. The way that it floods and recedes, and when the growing seasons happen, right? As the Nile goes, Egypt goes. Anything else? So the 7 cows, and then the other 7 ugly thin cows. You got 7 ears of grain, and then the thin grain, and the 7 ears of grain. 7 ears of grain on one stalk. It's like, it's good. You know what I mean? It's like one stalk gives you 7. It's like, that's going to be pretty plentiful. But then, these things are eaten up by the bad ones.
I feel like it's reminding me of your egg dream. Like, yes! How is a cow eating an egg? I mean, an egg. How is a cow eating another cow? And how is grain eating grain? Right. Like, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. But of course, we know there's a meaning. But what's the visualization here? Like, how is this happening in his dream? And of course, he's startled. So something, however he's seeing it, is probably interesting too.
It startles him enough that he woke from sleep, and then went to sleep and had another disturbing dream. Oh man! And who did he call? Who you gonna call?
Ghostbusters.
No, and I thought it was so crazy because I was reading up on how, like, they always call these magicians and different people like that, and they're supposed to be like, they're not just, one commentary I saw, it's like, they're not the ones of today, like wearing the tuxedos and flashing the cards. Like, they're some of the most educated, like, wise men that around. So when they call them, it's like, you should know what this means. And if none of them know, like, and we'll see how this plays out later, but I thought that was really interesting. And it'll show the magnitude of how God works through Joseph when that does take place later on. Because if the most wise, the highest educated, like the most sought after people can't help you, what does that say? What does that say about people and say about God?
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that they didn't guess. Like, they didn't try to come up with anything. It doesn't, or at least we don't see that. It's just like they didn't know. They just.
So, and I also think that it's interesting because a couple of commentaries that I read, one was like, it doesn't mean that they didn't give interpretations, but that none of them Pharaoh thought was appropriate.
Okay.
Right. So I think, and I'm not sure it could fall on one of those, because one thing that I always say is we don't want to shout where the Bible is silent. So the Bible doesn't tell us.
Right.
I think either of those could be the case, where they were like, no, we're not even going to guess because Pharaoh might do something. Or they could be like, well, we think it means this. And Pharaoh's like, nah, that's not it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but whatever, they just couldn't, they just didn't get it together. They couldn't please Pharaoh with that.
Yeah.
He was upset. It makes me think of the baker and the cupbearer as well, because their issue was that they had a dream and there was no one to interpret it. So it's almost like foreboding to Pharaoh that something's going on, but no one can tell me. So I feel completely out of control.
Yeah.
And Pharaoh, who is supposed to be like godlike, right, who's now out of control and has no information, he's probably really feeling lost in this. And one other thing I want to mention, it says that he woke up and he was troubled.
Yeah.
We saw the same thing with the cupbearer and the baker. They woke up and they were troubled, but the wording is a little different. The troubled here is a different word, and it's almost to the sense of like, I don't even want to go back to sleep. Right? I'm troubled in my dreams. I'm troubled to the point where I just want to stay awake. Because these dreams really got to him. Really got to him.
Yeah, I saw something that said, God troubles your spirit. God is who troubles our spirit, and he does so for a reason. Like you're unsettled for a reason, because something needs to change. Something's going to happen. Like they wouldn't have put that in there for no reason. Right. He was not just a little bit afraid or a little frightened by his dream, and you go back to sleep after a nightmare. It's like not my body, but my spirit is not comfortable.
Yeah.
That's verses 1-8. I'll read 9-13. It reads as follows. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, I remember my offenses today, when Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me and the chief baker in custody in the house of the captain of the guard. We dreamed on the same night, he and I, each having a dream with his own interpretation. A young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. When we told him, he interpreted our dreams to us, giving an interpretation to each man according to his dream. And as he interpreted to us, so it came about. I was restored to my office, and the baker was hanged. Hey, don't forget me, right, is what Joseph said to the cupbearer. And he said it just to the cupbearer, not to the baker, because he had done the interpretation that the cupbearer was going to be back in front of Pharaoh. Don't forget me. And 2 years later,
he's like, dang, I forgot.
Yes.
I mean, so what comes out to you all in this couple of verses?
There was a commentary I read that was saying that it was talking about God's timing, right? And the fact that, let's say he remembered Joseph and Joseph was released. Where does that leave us then? So they're like, maybe Joseph needed to stay there so that you could easily go grab him to interpret this dream, because maybe he would have been released and went back home, and then it would have been a whole different story. Or he would be released and go back and maybe make a family in Egypt. How big is Egypt for us to now find this man, especially we don't got no phones? Like, we can't just go grab him. It would take time to then track him down. So him being where he was necessary for this story to play out the way it's playing out. And I was like, God's timing, man. Like, we always go back to God's timing, and I'm always like, but you could just do it now.
You could, right.
And I'm sure Joseph was like, bro, I get it, but also could have just did it.
He's like, I know you with me, Lord. but you can be with me not in the pit.
Right.
You can be with me outside, free somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. And going back to the question we talked about earlier of like, can you think of like the things that God used to prepare and position you? So like, I 100% agree with God's timing. Like the one I read was talking about trusting A, God's timing, but B, that he'll use anything to have his work done. Any people, any things, like anything. And it wasn't that the cupbearer was like, oh, I remember. God had to intervene in this situation. And I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. So it started making me think a little deep. Okay. I'm going to digress for a second. So when I was reading the commentary, they were talking about how, you know, Joseph, let's go back to last episode. We were talking about how Joseph's probably like, okay, God, like when he reminded the cupbearer, hey, don't forget me. He's like, all right, I have to do something. You know, God, I've been here. Like, I trust you, but let me just throw this little thing out there, see if that'll help. You know, I was like, okay, God felt it necessary not to just continue to just let this go or let it play out as is. He had to step in and say, he put that little nugget into the mind of the cupbearer at this specific time so that Joseph could be brought before Pharaoh. So it wasn't just again, it's not happenstance. God is like aligning things and positioning things so that Joseph will be, I guess, victorious in the end. But as we'll see later on, but trusting that God will use him in the way that he needed to be used, which, like you said, if he released him early, if he remembered at the beginning and he was released, we wouldn't have the rest of this to read and talk about. So God had to let a couple more things align for us to get to where we are. So another thing that I highlighted too was that God, this whole thing shows Pharaoh, will wind up showing Pharaoh who God is. We'll see that a little bit later, but the fact that Joseph is again about to be brought before him to interpret a dream and nobody else could do it, it just will reveal a little bit more about God's character later on. So
yeah, it's interesting because I had the same kind of thoughts. I think mine may have been a little bigger in the sense of a little broader in the sense of God, the offenses that were committed. One was found guilty, the baker. One was found innocent. The fact that Joseph went into the jail that Pharaoh's prisoners would go to, is God working there. The fact that the cupbearer was actually innocent and got to meet Joseph, God is working there. The fact that the cupbearer is in close proximity to Pharaoh, such that when this time comes, he can bring up Joseph, God is working there too. Mm-hmm. The fact that God gave the cupbearer and the baker the dreams, which provide in this passage the receipts, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. God's working there too. The fact that God gave the dreams to Pharaoh at this exact moment, God's working there too. Mm-hmm. The fact that God is giving interpretations to the dreams that only Joseph can provide. Right. God's work. It's like, I don't care how you cut it and how you slice it, right? And all of us have brought up these good examples. It's like God is working, and it's on this bigger scale, I think, than we can even imagine. Yeah. Sometimes. Even to the point, and this ran through my head. Let me know what you want. God gave a dream to Joseph that was really about Joseph and his family, and ultimately, I think it's really about Israel and right, and mm-hmm. We'll see that even some chapters down the line. God gave personal dreams to the cupbaker and the cupbaker.
I knew you was gonna fix it.
The cupbearer and the baker. Thanks for believing in me. The cupbearer and the baker that were really personal in nature because they had done some offense. This dream that God is giving Pharaoh is more on a global scale. Mm. And I think it's because he's the leader, right? And we'll see this later, but when you read through some history things, Alexander just came on, like I think I mentioned this before, I'm a huge history buff, but Alexander came on Netflix. They did like this movie entry type thing, right? It's like documentary plus movie, and Netflix does this combining of things. But they, in that documentary, talked about Egypt being like the breadbasket of the ancient Near East. And I've heard it said that Egypt is the breadbasket of Rome
Mm.
because of the Nile, because they are able to provide so much in agricultural resources, enough so that they can feed everybody. So even that standpoint, when you look at it globally from this higher level, broader level, in my mind, it's like God is moving all of these things around when he wants to, as he needs to get, again, as we've said, to get his will done.
Yeah.
He is God who is sovereign, a God who is provident. So what he wants done is going to get done, and he's going to be able to move all the piece parts wherever they need to go to get it done.
But how do you see the big picture? Like I feel like I can, until more recently, I feel like I have not ever been able to see the big picture, because like you see little things moving, or like it's like little tiny, like you move an inch, like you step a little inch, and you see those little things lining up. But to see all of the pieces and zoom out a little bit and understand that God has a bigger purpose, I feel like, especially for my generation, I feel like it's possible. Not that it's impossible, but it feels impossible.
Yeah. It's I think it's something that we have to realize is there. I'm going to throw out a name. You all may not have heard of her, but Jen Wilkin. She is a Bible teacher, basically. Does a bunch of study guides. But this is one of the things that I've learned from her, and I guess it's also a testament to the fact that you can continue to grow in how you understand and take in the Word of God. But she is really, really good, and I'm always impressed when I listen to her talk about how things and these threads that run throughout Scripture that tie together. So now when I read, I'm starting to try and look at that broad picture, because the entirety of Scripture is like this really one big narrative, right? It's really about God reconciling a people back into himself, and everything, and in that he's revealing who he is to us, or how he's dealing with the people at the time and what he wants the people to do, and even who he says he is, right? But I think you see those ties, and you can bring those ties. Like one big global tie that we've seen already is that it says several times that God was with Joseph. And then when we get to the New Testament, we can still see that Jesus is saying, "Lo, I am with you even to the end of the age." So, right? And that he's sending the helper. He's sending the Holy Spirit. So there are these ties I think you can find, and it's just a matter of being willing to sort of look for those, I think.
Okay.
Particularly in Scripture.
Gotcha.
So, that's my answer, and I'm sticking. Anything else stick out to you all about these, in these verses? I think it was really just receipts.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to tell you everything. And Pharaoh, you're involved in this. I'm going to tell you everything that happened, and that's going to make you want to move. So we get to see how he moves. 14 through 16. You mind reading that?
Yeah. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came in before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." Joseph answered Pharaoh, "It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer."
Wow.
Confidence again.
Right. I know, right? It feels very much like when he had to do when he did the interpretation for the baker and the cupbearer, or the cupbaker, as I like to call it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it looks like one thing I read is like has developed a dependence on God. Like he's now like, he knows for 100% certain, I know it's not me. I know it's God. So I'm just going to let God work through me. And I thought it was interesting that it's not that he's like, I think it comes from God, or God, I hope you pull through this time. I hope those weren't one-offs. He's certain in what he says. Yeah. That I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. And I've been trying to figure it out, because with Jacob, you could see that growth. Right? Because Jacob went through this season where his mom helped him be a trickster, right? He was upset when he got tricked himself, and was given. I'm going to mess up the name, not Rachel, but his other wife, Leah, instead of Rachel, right? And Jacob was a trickster, and he had to do things like wrestle with God. He had to go through some down times when he had to come back before Esau and be scared. And it's almost like you could see that growth. But with Joseph, it's like when I question, like, was it always there? Which takes us back to 37, right? Is Joseph really that bratty? Really that naive? Or is he just no?
I believed in him from the beginning.
Like you were saying, right? That he's being built up into doing something. And so this just brings that question, because we don't really see the narrator talk about any growth that he has.
Right.
It's almost like he just jumps up one day like, "Oh, no, it's not me, it's God."
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, how did he get to that point? Right? It's like, for me, it's like a leader's born or are they made?
Oh, right? Yeah.
And so it's a little philosophical debate I have in my head all the time. Right? Are leaders born or are they made? And it's like, did Joseph just come in this way? Or did he have, or all of these things that he went through get him to this point? And so I think that's just an interesting question to have. I don't have an answer. It's just an interesting question. And then I also wrote down that he had to get a fresh cut and some new drip.
Yes.
Not drip.
Yes. I thought that was so interesting. I'm like, why would he be shaving? Like he's going to meet a girl or something. But I thought it was interesting because like this commentary said that I think it's a Hebrew custom to prepare themselves, shave and get clean.
I think it's Egyptian, because
Hebrews
usually don't shave. Beards.
Okay.
Right? So beards is not a new thing. The Jews generally have Hebrew folks, Israelites usually had beards. So they weren't supposed to shave them, particularly if they were married, I believe, if I remember.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
But Egyptian, on that side, I think there was this idea of shaving.
Okay.
So it was really about being
fitting in.
Yeah.
Right? Being presentable before Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Right. You're off to see the wizard. You need to look the part.
Yeah, look decent.
We can't have you up here any type of way. But also notice how quickly, right? It's like, and they quickly brought him. So this wasn't, he summoned them, and it wasn't like a no time thing. It was like, get him now. So it's not like they had a huge amount of time, like days or whatever. It's like, but they just had to do what they could do to get him in front of them.
Something else said that Joseph, kind of going back to our previous point, he didn't. I think it goes back to the idea of like, did he always have this in him? Like, when did he just have this confidence that God was gonna work? Remember we talked about faith and like having faith in God versus having faith in people. I feel like Joseph. This says that Joseph just anticipated that God was gonna do it. Like there wasn't a doubt. It was like, oh yeah, I just know like. I'm aware of what God has done thus far, and therefore this will happen. I think his faith kind of shines through, and also I wonder if he's kind of like, oh, about time, God. Now that this has 2 whole years, like they emphasized whole to kind of tell you how, like this has been every single minute of this Joseph has felt. He like about time. Something's happening. You got something good for me. Obviously, since he's interpreting the dream, he knows, he's doing God's work and all. But I just thought that was pretty cool, seeing how he's preparing for this big moment for him.
We already touched on it, but I mean, how many of us, right? We get the opportunity to be before the CEO of the company, or get the opportunity to be before a mayor or governor, or president or senator or whatever, and we're going to deflect. We go, no, it's not really me, it's the team.
Yeah, right.
Most people will be like, yeah, I did that.
Yeah,
I am him.
Yeah.
Right?
Timothy, I am Timothy. Yep.
But here it's Joseph is making no bones about it. It's not me. It's God working in all of this. It's God working. I think again speaks to who Joseph is, his character, and makes you wonder if that was in him all along, or whether it was something that grew.
Yeah.
Verses 17 to 24. And you want to read? You only had 3 verses, Mario. You should read.
We're gonna throw it back over there.
If you don't mind.
No, I don't. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Behold, in my dream, I was standing on the banks of the Nile. 7 cows, plump and attractive, came up out of the Nile and fed in the reed grass. 7 other cows came up after them, poor and very ugly and thin, such as I have never seen in all of the land of Egypt. And the thin, ugly cows ate up the first 7 plump cows. But when they had eaten them, no one would have known that they had eaten them, for they were still as ugly as at the beginning. Then I awoke. I also saw in my dream 7 ears growing on one stalk, full and good. 7 ears withered, thin, and blighted by the east wind sprouted after them. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 good ears. And I told it to the magicians, but there was no one who could explain it to me."
So Pharaoh's just rehashing his dream.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There are a couple of different things that were added here, though.
Yeah.
Anybody want to talk to what those are?
I don't think the first time he said he was standing, was he?
I think he said he was standing on the bank.
Oh, yeah, by the Nile. Okay,
Right.
so he said I was standing by the Nile. This time he said I was standing on the banks of the Nile.
Right.
I guess that's the same.
Pretty simple.
He added that the cows are ugly.
Like
None like he had ever seen.
He's very ugly and they're poor.
Yeah.
So first they were just ugly and thin. Now they're poor and very ugly.
Mm-hmm.
They're ugly. He says, "Such as I had never seen in all the land of Egypt."
Yeah.
I mean, so he's like, these cows, these ugly cows, I ain't never seen nothing like this before in my life.
Ever.
Yeah.
Ever. That's Kanye, right?
That is it?
I don't know.
Oh, no.
I heard it somewhere. But he's like, I've never seen this type of animal in Egypt before.
Yeah.
This thing is so bad looking. How do we even associate it with the Nile in Egypt is what I take away from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one thing. The poor, he'd never seen these in Egypt. Anything. What happened after they ate the ugly? So it's, I don't know about y'all, but it's to me weird. And I read something that said it was like he's seeing cannibalism because cows are eating cows.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens to the ugly thin cows after they eat the plump, attractive, beautiful cows?
Nothing.
He's like, they don't even change.
They don't get no bigger.
They don't get fat. They don't look full. These cows, I don't know what they are, but they just like is brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't notice that wasn't in the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, he says they were still ugly as at the beginning. I mean, you eat the beautiful cows. I expect something to happen, and it didn't.
I wonder what does that mean?
So this is my takeaway, and you all can chime in and let me know what you think. My takeaway is that we're getting some insight into what Pharaoh was really bothered about in his dream. Remember the Nile. So when I think this through, the Nile is the source of life for Egypt. So something beautiful and plump and attractive coming out of the Nile and grazing by the Nile makes sense.
Yeah.
But something ugly coming out, like I've never seen before, and then eating up the beautiful things that I expect to see. Wait, that ain't right. That's not how we do things around here in Egypt.
Yeah.
So I think what we're getting is some insight into what's really bothering Pharaoh about this dream. This ugliness, what does it really mean? Where is it really coming from? Because we're not generally as Egypt associated with those types of things. We don't usually associate those types of things with our source of life, which is the Nile.
Okay.
And so that's why he I think elaborates on this, and there's more than just what was said in verses 1-8. I don't know. Does
I don't think.
Yeah, that makes
that
sense.
makes sense. I don't think that when you eat something, you don't change. Like, you might get a little bloated and it goes away. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
It takes me eating this consistently for me to then change. So to me, it was like, that's normal. Like, they ate it and they might be full, but they still famished. That's when you go and feed the children, they don't automatically like plump up and become chubby kids. They are just like, I'm still here, skinny.
I expect to see some belly though.
Something.
It's a cow.
I'm a skinny cow that ate a whole cow.
Yeah,
I
a
don't
plump
know.
one.
Like, I just thought that makes sense. Like, you ate one time, you had one feast. Yes, I ate one feast, but there's nothing else for me to eat now.
Pharaoh didn't say they got sleepy. He didn't say they had itis.
Listen, he was focused on how ugly they were. He didn't tell us no other details.
Yeah, like, why is this ugly thing coming out of this beautiful, plentiful, like, yeah, that's...
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's true, right? How much would you expect him to change? But he was still startled because there was no change. It was like he was expecting to see something. And if he had seen anything, I wonder if he would have been like, okay, they ate him, but I see this. But he's like, they still look exactly the same. And the same thing for the stalks, right? I mean, it's not as prevalent with the cows, but he does add, this withered and thin and blighted for the grain. And so I really think it's the bad part that he just doesn't get. The plentiful part, and that makes sense, right? Even now, when it's plentiful and everything's going good, we're fine. But it's when bad stuff happens, or we think that there may be some bad stuff coming, and we can focus in on that a bit more and say, this doesn't look right or it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
So that's my take. Now I understand that. It shouldn't have been. They'd have to eat 3 or 4 cows to actually look healthy.
over the course of some days. Like, one meal ain't about to do nothing for me.
Yeah. Especially when you're hungry.
Verses 25-32 of 41. I'll read those if that's okay.
Yep.
Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are one. The 7 lean and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears, blighted by the east wind, are also 7 years of famine. It is as I told Pharaoh. God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. There will come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. But after them there will arise 7 years of famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will consume the land, and the plenty will be unknown in the land by reason of the famine that will follow. For it will be very severe. And the doubling of Pharaoh's dream means that the thing is fixed by God, and God will shortly bring it about. Wow. So Joseph gives him his interpretation. I read this and I'd be like, Joseph is speaking truth to power. Pharaoh being the most powerful person in Egypt. So what else stands out to you about his interpretation? So we see what the 7 means, right? And we see that the 7 is applied equally to the cows and whatever state they're in, the attractive, beautiful ones and the ugly, thin ones, and the 7 plump grains versus the east wind blighted grains. That it's 7 years, but the 7 years are really 14 in total with different aspects to them, right?
Yeah. I think 7 years of famine is, like Pharaoh said, it's something he's never seen before. They probably have never experienced even a month of famine. And you're saying, here we are about to experience 7 whole years.
Yeah.
So I think kind of goes back to the interpretations. Maybe the interpretations, if they gave interpretations, weren't as severe. Like, he's waking up like, no, this is something severe. It's not something where you could just say, oh, 7 days of this and 7 days of that, or 7 months of this and 7 months of that, or, it's it's way past. Like I can't even think about 7 years of my life of doing something because I'm not that old yet. Maybe, I don't know, but like 7 years is a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe 7 years of school.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, like, you've been in school since kindergarten. That's 7 years.
I didn't go to kindergarten.
That's unfathomable.
But yeah, I think, I don't know, but you don't think about that as like.
Sorry, boy. I didn't mean to trigger anything.
No, I was just like, you don't.
I didn't go to kindergarten.
I didn't, because we weren't in America.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I didn't think about how long that is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
But I mean, 2 years seems like a long time as well.
Mm-hmm.
And back to your opening questions. Wow, those opening questions were good. It's just, and you said it earlier, like 3 years to be locked up. Well, we weren't in jail, but we were basically isolating, as much as, the CDC or whomever said we should. That was 3 years. But now when we think back, I feel like, 2020, that was 4 years ago. And the whole COVID thing is like, it seems like it was a blip.
Yeah, it does.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think when we hear it, it seems like this is going to be this long, long time. When we're going through it, it can seem like it's just dragging on and on. But when we get past it, we look back and we're like, oh, yeah, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
Assuming you get past it without any like major thing happening.
Well, that's favor, isn't it? Like that's the blessings and favor of God, like how we talked about before, coming out on the other side. However, and I don't know actually, how is it like? However, you come out on the other side of these kinds of situations, that shows that you've been blessed and highly favored by God, or is it if you come out successful?
I think it depends who you're talking to. The people who come out and something tragic happens may look back at that and be like, yeah, that was the hardest time of my life. It dragged on. Whereas some of us who were just like, I mean, it happened. I had fun at home with my little family. And
yeah.
I didn't get to go outside, but it was fine. I'm an introvert anyway. Like, weird, like, oh, it's fine. But there are people who lost, their loved ones. And they're like, no, it was a long time for me. And it's not over. Like, they will tell you it's not over. They would tell you that we're still going through this and people are still getting sick. And like, we like to say now that we're out of that, but technically we're not. Like, it's still happening. So it's just not as bad as it was. Right. So I think it depends who you're talking to.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
And I also think to add on to that, because that was a good response, that when you get to the other side of things, being blessed and favored really comes down to, in my mind, right? Did you get out of it what the Lord wanted you to get out of it? Because you can go through some things because, I mean, and Scripture says this, right? I think it's in James where, your faith is going to be tested and things happen because they build you up in certain areas. And so sometimes it's just that you want to be built. So if you the Lord wants you to be built in a certain area. So if you've gone through something and you haven't grown closer to Him and Him, I mean, with some of the stuff that's happened recently, if it had happened 10 years ago, I don't think I would have handled it the same way. But because there have been other things that have happened that may have been on a smaller scale, that God was moving me towards it. Now I'm like, no. Now I know, and I'm leaning all in. I'm not stepping back. I'm not doing what ifs. I'm not. It's okay. It's happening. You're working. I know you're still doing things, and I'm just going to lean into you.
Okay.
So I think that it's the impact of people and what you've gone through and the results of that, but also what the Lord is trying to do in that season for you. And I'm not saying it's not always going to be, this rosy outcome. Sometimes it's not going to be rosy, but we have to, as believers, know that the Lord is working.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So I think that's the bottom line.
That's a good one. I'm so glad we're recording this so I can go back and watch it. Because I definitely my grandmother said that exact same thing when I asked her.
Shout out to Grandma.
Shout out to Grandma of the pod.
All right, so we decided to go ahead and wrap up right here because we're probably like a good hour or so in, and we still have like 20 more verses.
Yeah.
And I think as we go on, there's some deeper things that'll come out of this conversation, and we don't want to give you guys a 3-hour episode. So we're gonna pause. And any final thoughts on what we've discussed so far up until verse 32?
I think for me, it's seeing the broad scope of everything that the Lord has been doing and working to this point, starting to come to fruition.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this during the episode, even who gets what dreams and who can give interpretations, who goes back before Pharaoh and who doesn't. Where does Joseph go when he gets locked up? So again, and this has been brought up many times, and I hope I'm not stealing your thunder, Desmond, but 50-20, what you meant for evil, right? God is working out for good. And we get the evidence of that. And it's just cool to see, because it could have been early on where you're wondering where everything is going.
Yeah.
You're wondering, okay, this is happening to Joseph. His brothers don't like him. He's thrown in the pit. He's sold into slavery. He's falsely accused. He goes to jail. He's forgotten about. And it's like, all right, now I get to see how some of this stuff looks like it's starting to work out. Now we need to see why. Why is it working out this way? Why is the Lord doing this? So I think that's my final thoughts for this.
It's good.
I concur. That's all the same things I was thinking. Yes.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I'll let you go first.
It's okay.
Yeah. I think I agree as well. Like, Joseph is, I don't know if we can still title it Moving On Up yet because we haven't gotten there. No. But maybe we go back to your old title. We're off to see the wizard. And now we are at the wizard, and we're going to figure out now what is God's plan moving forward.
Yeah.
What are we going to see in episode 5.2? I don't know. Episode 5B?
Yeah, episode 6. How about that? We'll just keep numbering them straight.
All right.
All right.
But yes, thank you for joining us. And we will see y'all in the same outfit in a couple minutes.
I'm about to go change.
Not go change in 2 weeks. See y'all in 2 weeks for part 2.
Deuces.